Good morning and welcome everyone. It's the first formal meeting of the Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny panel. Can remind all the attendees this meeting is being webcast. Before we move to the actual formal agenda in our packs, I would like to ask that we do a round of introductions. So I'll work this way from the room. So if the panel members can introduce themselves first and the officers can introduce themselves when they bring their items forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Tyler Hawkins, Dalton Councillor.
John Taylor, Kirkburton.
Harry McCarthy from Conn Valley Ward.
Councillor Graham Turner, Port Hill for Growth and Regen.
Councillor Susan Lee Richards, Newson Wood.
Thank you. Susan, I feel that you've... you could have moved forward a bit. No worries. Okay, so I'm Councillor Yusra Hussain. I'll be chairing the Growth and Regen panel. So we're going to move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Can I ask if anyone's got any interest to declare? No? Okay, thank you.
Reading through the information, there was a reference to the Home Firth Town Centre Improvement Plan. And I think that charity I'm a trustee of may have some interest in that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any interest to declare? Okay. Can I just mention myself as a chair, I am on the Housing and Improvement Board, so item 7 is to do with housing delivery plan update. There might be some overlap there, so I would like to declare that. John?
On that basis, I best declare that I'm also a member of the Housing Improvement Board.
Thank you. Okay, that's fine. That's noted. Thank you, members. Okay. If anyone remembers anything at the end, please do speak to Jenny towards the end of the meeting. Thank you. So item 3, which is admissions of the public. As far as I know, there's no items that have been brought forward from the public. All items are in terms of public discussion. Deputations and petitions. Jenny, have we received any?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 5, which is public question time. Have we received any questions from members of the public, Jenny?
No, none received.
Thank you. So we move swiftly on to item 6, which is introduction to Growth and Regeneration Directorate. I'll now invite Joanne to present.
Can I just give a brief
Councillor
introduction
Turner
first?
Sure.
So thank you everybody for attending this meeting this morning. As you rightly point out, it's the first one of this civic year. As you'll see, we've got 2 quite weighty items on the agenda today, had the housing delivery update and the small centres programme. So Joanne is now going to give a short presentation on the role of the directorate and what we, how we operate and what we do. So over to you, Joanne. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Joanne Bartholomew and I have the absolute privilege of being Director for Development in Kirklees Council. So can I just check that everybody can see the slides? Yep, thank you. So what I wanted to do was, given that it's a new year for Scrutiny, is just go over what the role of Growth and Regeneration is. We have a video that we will share to the panel afterwards. It takes about 7 minutes, which takes us through the wider development in the council. And showcases some of the work that we actually do. So I want to talk to you today about why investment matters, and I want to talk to you about how we're going to showcase our cultural heart, and then, as I've already indicated, we will share a video later for panel members to look at their leisure. So one of the key things for us as a council is ensuring that we have a district that is incredibly strong and has a really deep seated sustainable economy that allows all of our residents to have a great quality of life, and that surely will lead to thriving communities, growing businesses, high prosperity and low inequality. Those are all great big words, aren't they? But how do we deliver that? In order to deliver a really sustainable and inclusive economic growth across Kirklees, and to ensure that everything we do puts our people, partners and our places at the heart of it, with 3 key services across our directorate: skills and regeneration, development, and homes and neighbourhoods. The 2 items on your agenda today are both within the development area, which is my area, so we'll cover development first. We do, in development, look at housing growth. Thomas will take you through some of the successes and our future plans for housing growth later, but in the main, housing growth ensures that we have enough houses and the right type of houses and the right sort of tenure of houses for all of our residents going forward. We work utilising the council's land and work with other developers to bring forward housing sites, making sure that we have at the heart of what we do the council's carbon agenda and inclusivity, so that we're encouraging both affordable and lifetime homes to be built. Development also includes our corporate landlord and capital delivery services. So that's everything that's the current built environment that the council owns. We are a large asset owning council with over 130 buildings within our possession, including the one that we're in today at Huddersfield Town Hall, which has itself seen some investment from the capital programme. And we have a significant amount of capital investment across the wider estate, creating new affordable spaces, as well as creating some dementia-friendly spaces at the moment, investing in children's centres and investing in children's care homes. We also in development have housing services. This is where we are the front door to homes and neighbourhoods, the 3rd area of the directorate. Housing services ensures that people who find themselves in the position of wanting to understand whether they can get social housing are given an allocation, and also where they're not entitled to social housing or where their wait for social housing would be considerable, they help them access private options around that area. It also deals with homelessness and refugee and migration resettlement. And finally, and on our agenda today is small centres, we have our town centres. Creating vibrant towns and villages across the district will ensure that we create a sense of economic prosperity, and that we manage and utilise our own assets and those of our partners in a way in which the community recognises something that's shaped by them. And the other 2 areas that are under Councillor Turner's portfolio are skills and regeneration, where we undertake major projects. So this is works like the A62 corridor, working with WICA around bus station and rail network improvements. We've also got business and economy, where we understand how we can maximise the Kirklees pound, particularly through social value, but also how we can grow our current businesses and encourage other businesses to join us. And we have our employment and skills that looks at post-16 skills. So over in children's services under Joanne Sanders, there is the school system and the post-16, so the 16 to 18-year-old college system. Post-16 is dealt with in this area around employment and skills, and that can be encouraging people to do career changing or encouraging people who've seen considerable worklessness back into the working environment. And finally, our planning service, which deals with our statutory responsibility around planning and our requirements to ensure that we're delivering our homes as well as the local plan. And then the final part of our directorate is homes and neighbourhoods, where we look after the council's housing stock. There's over 22,000 homes that people live in, and the operation for managing, maintaining and ensuring that they are safe, warm and compliant is done in that particular area through a combination of their operations service and assets and development. Housing management and partnerships area works in conjunction with housing services across in development to ensure that people are supported to live their best lives in those homes. So why does all of this matter? For us in growth and regeneration, what we're trying to do is ensure that everybody gets the best quality of life, and having increased productivity through better housing, skills and jobs means better wages and better quality of life for residents. Business growth will result in improved productivity, so the more startups we get, the more improved business survival and expansion of some of our key high growth businesses will create more and better jobs. Our investment in the town centre, which has started both in Huddersfield and in Dewsbury, with the George Hotel in Huddersfield and with the Arcade in Dewsbury, which are key parts of both of our blueprints and part of the town deal in Dewsbury, reduces our risk and encourages significant external investment. It creates confidence in what we're doing as a council and will help us secure further funding. Our partnership investment has been over £2 billion confirmed since our blueprints were announced, and as a team we've brought in nearly £40 million worth of external funding into the council's projects. Inward investment in our business growth is important to ensure that we have a good quality of business good quality businesses that's bringing in business rates and council tax revenue that support the baseline services of the council. And that will give us reduced reliance on demand-driven and means-tested services such as children's, adult care, social housing and homelessness. Put it simply, if we have a resilient economy where people live high quality and good lives, then they'll be better able to manage their own lives and to support themselves, creating more wealth and have across the district. Just bear with me because I've lost this. We have a key number of political priorities that our portfolio holder has set for us over the last year and going forward. These range from individual projects such as the George Hotel and the Transpennine upgrade to wider initiatives such as tenant voice and tenant safety, and include things that we've got on the agenda today for you around housing quality and the housing growth and the town small centres. So what we're going to deliver in the next 5 years. In the next 5 years, we're going to be looking at delivering significant new homes. The first phase of Dewsbury Riverside will be around 2,500 homes, and over the next 5 years, we'll move towards delivery for that. Thomas will talk to you today about wider housing growth, but Daisy Hill, Field House, and the key areas in Dewsbury remain a key component of what we're trying to achieve there. And in Ashbrow and Suthill, in partnership with Keepmoat, we're building 610 new homes, including 54 affordable homes and significant amount of extra care provision across there. In terms of tenant satisfaction across homes and neighbourhoods, the measures for those, and I note that a number of panel members today are on the Homes and Neighbourhoods panel, will ensure that our tenants are kept safe and that their homes are compliant and that they feel valued and that their voice is heard in terms of decision making around their home, and we hopefully will see a reduction in complaints, cases of disrepair and much more collaborative in decision making. There have been a number of significant national cases and we are mindful of all of those in moving forward in homes and neighbourhoods. We'll also look to transfer our corporate assets where appropriate to the community to be used for inclusive, viable and sustainable activity, and we work in support with locality in ensuring that community groups are structured and able to take on their assets. Across transportation and infrastructure, we're working with active travel in North Kirklees, with some evidence towards a bit of a shift towards people walking and travelling and making transport infrastructure more sustainable. We've done significant road network improvements in Huddersfield, and those have just about finished now. And in terms of both Huddersfield, Dewsbury and Batley town centres, the healthy town centres, looking at how our assets are maintained and how we keep them safe. Going on to the wider environment, our initiative with White Road Forest and the Calder catchment will have over 670 hectares of new tree coverage, and we'll have over 1,000 hectares of green streets in West Yorkshire. We lead on the White Rose Forest for the district, the wider district. And we'll hope to increase on the 35,000 trees planted by ourselves in 2021-2022. Our Station to Stadium Enterprise Corridor and the investment zone associated with it are moving forward with increasing private sector jobs and investment. There's been significant interest in our Station to Stadium Enterprise Corridor, and the works on the A62 corridor, I think, have strengthened that. You cannot fail to have noticed the university's new buildings growing up on that particular area. As a bit of a construction geek, I'm quite interested in the central column that has gone up, but that it just shows confidence in that particular area. And that will move forward with other businesses as they join us across that area to create Huddersfield's Incubation and Innovation Programme. Working with the college, we've delivered over 900 extra learner places through the Process Manufacturing Centre and a significant increase in apprenticeship and work placement officer. So in delivering our vision for Kirklees, what do we do? So I'd like to move on to two of our, that takes us on to two of the key reports for today, Chair. But I am happy to take any questions. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Do you have any comments or questions on that item? Yeah? Councillor Taylor?
Thanks, Joanne. Pretty comprehensive and much appreciated. Comments sort of as well as questions, really. Obviously representing a South Huddersfield area, when I read this report, it's disappointing that there's virtually no reference to anything in the south of the district. When I look at the political priorities, again, if one of my residents looks at this, they'll go, well, where's our part of this? Because it talks a lot about, and as you have done, about our urban areas, and I understand why. But we have needs in the rural areas as well. We need startups. I mean, I've been talking to one business in my patch about the lack of land for, very small startups or incubating small businesses. When I look at the next 5 years, a lot going on in transport in Huddersfield and in North Kirklees. No mention whatsoever of South Kirklees. And I do wonder what I'm supposed to say to my residents in response to that. If they read this, what's the answer I give them? Just on the white rose and trees, the information provided, interesting, but it's kind of West Yorkshire level. I'd expect to see, well, this is what it means for Kirklees. So 1,000 hectares of green streets. Well, do we get one street? Do we get all of it? That I expect when we get a report that it's Kirklees specific, so that we can ask questions about Kirklees, because I really can't take anything from this. Similarly, we're going to increase on the 35,000 trees we planted. By how many? By when? One of my worries, and I've been involved in some of this tree planting out in my patch, is a lot of these are whips, and a lot of them don't survive. So, are we doing anything in terms of going back and checking how many of them are still there, and do we have a replacement program for ones that have gone? Some of them, to be fair, some little so-and-sos have pulled out or broken, but others, and particularly when it's very dry, they're not surviving because they're not getting enough water. So it sounds great we've planted 35,000 trees, but how many of them are actually still surviving? I think I'll pause there and let my colleagues perhaps comment as well. Give them a chance.
Joanne, do you want to respond to that before we move on to the next question?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Taylor, if I wasn't clear. That was an overview of us as a service and as a set of directorates. Wasn't intended to be an in-depth report on that. It was intended to set a flavour of what we do, so that as reports come forward over the course of this next year, they can be fit into the context of what we wider deliver. However, I will take away your points around the White Rose Forest, and I'll make sure that that Edward Highfield addresses those back to scrutiny. In terms of the wider investment, the infrastructure and moving around the district helps not only North and South Kirklees, but it does help across across the wider network itself. And I am pleased to say that on the agenda today, Simon will be talking about South Kirklees in particular, around Home Firth and around the Marsden funding that we've received in his Small Centres report.
Councillor Turner?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up your one or two comments you made about the political priorities. And you referenced that it all seems to be North Kirklees rather than South Kirklees. If you look at the political priorities, George Hotel, South Kirklees, Cultural Heart, South Kirklees, Transpennine Upgrade, South Kirklees, there's only one reference in those political priorities to North Kirklees, and that's the Dewsbury Town Plan. So I don't accept that it's North Kirklees heavy, it's across the borough. We look to invest wherever there's an opportunity, and we will continue to do so. This is a borough-wide policy, not just focusing, as you like try to imply, that it's the north. There's a massive investment going into South Kirklees. And just pick up your point on startups. You're right, it is a challenge getting startups, and as alluded to earlier on, part of my portfolio is business growth. I talk to any number of businesses on a regular basis, and you're right, there is challenges. One of the problems we have is the fact that in the more rural areas, during the local plan process, it was very, very difficult to get land allocated for industrial use. Hence, it's not a great deal of allocations in those areas. We're about to start the refresh of the local plan, and I'd like to think that within that refresh, we can find some more sites within the rural areas for industrial development. But as I say, we're about to start that process. It'll take a little while, as these things do, because it's quite complicated. But I would like to think we can identify more industrial land this time than we did in the local plan.
Okay. John, do you want to come back in?
Yeah,
And then...
I said rural South Kirklees. I fully accept that, and I did make mention of the urban areas in Huddersfield, Dewsbury and Batley. It's rural South Kirklees that there's very little recognition of in the political priorities.
I'll just come back. As someone who's lived with a HD8 postcode or a HD7 postcode all my life, is the investment in Huddersfield, the investment in the George will play into the rural areas, because we can't build a hotel in rural areas. We're building one in Huddersfield, which has traditionally been there. The Cultural Heart will attract people in. So these are investments in areas where people can access from those areas. And I'm sure if you went back to your residence and we were going to bulldoze the centre of Kirkburton and build a Cultural Heart, you wouldn't be very popular. So it's about making things available to people. The Transpennine Upgrade, a lot of people travel in and out of Kirklees. They will have always used Huddersfield Station on the vast majority of cases, because the existing lines on the Penistone line is not fit for purpose at the moment. So those benefits are actually there. They're being worked on now, so they will benefit those people in South and rural Kirklees.
You're coming for a supplementary, John?
Yeah, I think just, and we probably do need to move on to, but just to comment that people in the rural South Kirklees aren't coming into Huddersfield, and they're partly not coming into Huddersfield because there's nothing there for them. And I accept that the Cultural Heart and everything is part of that challenge to try and make Huddersfield more attractive. But the problem is there are very few buses. You've said yourself that the Penistone line isn't fit for purpose, but there's nothing on here to tackle that. And, you know, it's difficult for people unless they've got a car to get in. And if they have got a car, there's nowhere to park in Huddersfield because you're reducing the car parking spaces. And we're not investing in roads out in the rural areas. So people don't go into Huddersfield because it's not that easy to get into. There's nothing in there. So, again, I come back to you, Graham, that you need to reflect the whole of the district and the needs of the whole of the district. The Transpennine line doesn't go anywhere near rural South Kirklees. It goes up through Slough and out through to Manchester. It doesn't come out into the areas that I represent. We do have a train line, but it's not mentioned anywhere. I'll leave it there.
Councillor Taylor, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just quickly. Yes, you're right. The Transpennine doesn't go through your patch. It doesn't go through many patches. But we can't build a new railway. And as you well know, we have tried twice now to find investment in the Peninsula line from central government, and twice they refused that, despite the fact I believe that there's a really economically, very strong economic argument for development of that. So if you live in the rural area, you have always had to travel to whether it be Huddersfield or Wakefield to catch a train. When I used to go to London a lot pre-COVID, I used to catch a train at Wakefield, and I accepted that it was a half an hour drive in the morning to Wakefield to catch a train. So those facilities there, you're right, perhaps the bus services could be improved, but again, that's not something we have control over. As we well know, that's run through WICA, and these are private businesses and will operate where there's a margin for them. But Huddersfield Station has always been in Huddersfield. Wakefield Station has always been in Wakefield. We can't move those, but the investment will allow people to come into Huddersfield, catch a train, and be in Manchester or Leeds quicker or wherever they want to go. But you're right, one of the main things we should be investing in the Peninsula line, but unfortunately that's unlikely to be the case for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Councillor Susan Lee Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Lots of positives in here, but there's a few things I think are I'd like to see more of. I don't see anything on the political priorities that say climate change. I know we're always told it's embedded, but I think it needs a higher priority, and especially going forward, we can't afford to ignore it. In terms of homes, you say affordable and lifetime. Some councils, like Exeter, are now making sure all houses built on their own land are to passive house standard. Do we have such an ambition in Kirklees? And in terms of the tree planting, I also have to fess up again. As part of River Home Connections, I do attend the White Rose Forest meetings on their behalf for the smaller NGOs. And so our volunteers have planted quite a lot of those 35,000 trees. And our volunteers do go back and maintain them and try to make sure that any that are damaged are replaced, etc. But in terms of trees, I'd also like to know, are we're talking about street trees, are we retaining as many mature trees as possible? I had an email from somebody concerned about the trees being cut down near the Queensgate Market, that they don't want to see those gone. I also had an email from somebody saying that when we do talk about climate change, we're talking about in terms of energy efficiency of homes, but what about active travel, making it easier for people to leave the car at home and use a bus? I know it's WICA, but we are part of that. We must have a little bit of influence somewhere.
Thank you for your question. Just to clarify for panel members before the officers come in, as you know, we were the Economy Neighbourhood Scrutiny panel, so we have branched off into two areas. One area is growth and regen, just as a reminder, and the other area is climate change. So we've got to be mindful that we're not encroaching on scrutiny too much in terms of the climate change action plans. That is for another scrutiny panel to be undertaking. If there are any questions after the meeting, I'm sure the officers can look into that, but we need to try and focus on the growth and regen aspect of the scrutiny panel. Just a gentle reminder for everyone. Any panel officers want to come in on the other questions? Oh.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of passive house, there are a number of things that we look at on our own land, and one of those is around affordability and carbon standards. So absolutely, we do look at that, and then we draw up a business plan accordingly. So that's not to say that we are or we aren't doing it. It's to say it's something that we would consider. And we have looked at in part. There's a clear balance to be struck between affordability of delivering the property versus the carbon impact of that, and we're always balancing that off.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, just pick up on the passive house. It's really difficult because if you go to full passive house standards, it takes longer to build, for one thing. The cost is another consideration. We must try and maintain the costs of building and keep them within affordability for people. And there's probably a sweet spot to be developed on this. So we're developing some houses at Suthill, which I've been to the site now several times. I've seen it right from more or less the start through to now. We've actually got homes that are finished, and I've been in there, watched the process. And those are using off-site construction, and if you build off-site construction to the level of insulation they've got, the heating requirement is very, very limited. So it may not be true passive, but I can't use the quote from the developer because it was quite rude, but they are very, very easily to warm up and take usually very little energy to do that. And I was at a conference and an exhibition all day on Thursday and looking at other models of how you can develop modern houses which may not be passive, but they're incredibly close to being passive, relatively easy and cheaper than passive houses. There's lots of alternatives out there, which is something we're going to start to look at of how we do this as we go forward. But it's a balance, getting the spend right so they're affordable, but getting that insulation. And a lot of it's about insulation, isn't it? You know, you might not get a certificate saying it's passive, but if it's 99 or 90% passive, that's by me, that would be great. And the other problem, of course, with passive longer term is you have to train people how to live in them. There's a very, very defined way of living them. You cannot drill a hole in a wall because you destroy it. So that training of people almost is a challenge as well, because people are used to living in a house where they just go in and do blah, blah, blah. And 2 or 3 moves down the line is that information could get lost. People won't understand. So I think the methods we're using at the moment, and hopefully we'll continue to improve on them as technology and the way and means of building advance, our houses will be very highly insulated and will be very cheap to run. But they may not be 100% passive, but they will be the best available at the time within the relative budgets. Just pick up on Queensgate trees. Queensgate trees are the bane of everybody's life, so we'll wait and see what happens with Queensgate trees. There's for and against on cutting or not cutting them down. It's an interesting discussion that is been ongoing for many years and will continue, no doubt, as we move forward with cultural heart.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
No, I was just going to say that my understanding of passive house is that it's a sort of comfort standard, and yes, they do have mechanical ventilation and heat recovery systems which people need to know how to use. But also you've got to think about the cooling with our increasingly uneven climates where we're getting hot summers and then wet, miserable winters. So it's good to hear that it's all being taken into account and that we're working towards as near passive as we can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bring Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Chair. I just first of all want to start with a comment really on an area that's been touched on by John and Sue and Graham as well, with the sort of investment that Kirklees are doing in bus infrastructure. We're doing our part, but the issue is the bus services that are being provided. Over the weekend in Dalton, First Bus Group have basically cut all bus services after 7 o'clock to my ward. That is going to have a massive impact on those who are evening workers, wanted to go on the commute and come back. As well, the bus services went to Linley and stopped near HRI, so those who want to go visit relatives or go there for work as well will not be able to access those services. This is all a discussion that I'm having with your Cabinet Member for Transport, our Wyker Transport Committee representatives, and the MPs as well, because it is the bus providers who are letting us down. Particularly in First Group last year, published profits of 220 million. The fact that they can't find a bit of money to provide services in my ward is frankly disgusting. So we can do our bit as a council and with partners to provide better bus infrastructure, but it's the bus providers who then need to step up and deliver for our residents. But a question I do have on a different area is the 900 extra learner places from Kirklees College that's referenced in this document. Have they been taken up by, do we know if they've been fully taken up by local employers, and what the sort of reaction has been to the service provided by Kirklees College? Because I sit on the industry advisory panel at the university, which has manufacturing employers sitting on there. I also work with Caldale and Kirklees Manufacturing Alliance, and sort of the consensus over the past few years with Kirklees College is that the provision being provided hasn't been good enough, and they've seen a migration from Kirklees College more to a pre. We're based over in Bradford at the moment, and I know APRI are also interested in moving over into Kirklees as well. So I'm just wondering sort of whether those places have all been taken up and what the feedback has been on those as well.
Joanna?
Thank you, Chair. I normally pride myself on being able to answer anything, but I'm afraid I can't answer Councillor Hawkins' question, and I'll have to get Edward to reply back to him.
Is that all right, Councillor Tyler? Okay, that's fine. Any further comment or questions on that particular item? So what I'm hearing from the panel members is that transport is quite a key thing that's coming out of discussions. And that's something that I shall reflect on and take away and see how we can incorporate that. Is that okay? Councillor Turner?
Of course, public transport is an issue for everybody at the moment, as Councillor Hawkins has pointed out. First Bus made some swinging changes over the weekend, and I think most of us sat here have probably been affected by those where First Bus operates. But we are looking, don't forget, we have an investment plan for Huddersfield Bus Station and Dewsbury Bus Station in conjunction with Wyke, because that's theirs, whereas we own the Huddersfield one. So we are looking to invest in those facilities, and if we can get those facilities better and more modern, hopefully that will encourage footfall onto buses. And as being pointed out, these are private businesses. The more footfall they see, the more likely they are to put extra buses on it, or at least maintain the current level of bus service. So that investment over the next few years hopefully will help people to get back onto buses, because we're still not pre-COVID levels with bus transport. We need to get people back into public transport, but it's a bit chicken and egg. We need people to go to buses, but then we need the buses. So it is a bit of a chicken and egg situation at the moment. But those two investment opportunities, I'm sure, will help in the future drive people back, help put people back onto buses.
Thank you for that clarification. It's really pleased to hear that we are investing in those two bus stations that you mentioned. But just to be just something that I'm picking up on in terms of what you've said. Whilst we are investing in that, I hope that the bus services do consider the operating times and improving that side of, public transport, particularly buses, the timings to be efficient. I think there's a lot of other factors to go with that, and I hope that they can look into that, as well as obviously investment is one side of things. Do we have any further comments or questions on that? No? I don't see any further comments or questions. No? So we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Joanne. Thanks for... Yeah. So
I'll quickly introduce the housing growth. You've got the report before you with the quite detailed appendix attached to it. This is a cabinet report that went through cabinet only last week, so it's up to date, and hopefully you will see that there's not only are we doing things now, but we have a pipeline of projects coming along, so that there's a longer term investment plan in that. So who's going to speak on this?
I'll do a quick...
Yeah.
is it...
I'll do a quick introduction,
Okay.
if I may, and then Thomas will take you through some key highlights of the report, and then obviously between us we'll take any questions. I'm really pleased for this report to be in front of scrutiny. By 2026 there'll be over 900 more homes. We quite often talk about houses in our bit of the world and building, but one of the things that we must always remember is that we're creating homes for people, and those are much needed homes across our district. And so I'm quite excited about what we're doing here. We've got some really key strategic sites that Thomas will just address, the two main ones, and we've got some pipeline things coming forward, and always be mindful around affordability and mix of housing, as I said previously. But I'll hand over to Thomas because it is his report.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to Scrutiny for having me. I'll give you a brief overview of the report. The first part covers more broadly what our team are involved in and the programme of works we've got, and then I'll talk through Appendix 1 in summary, which gives you some detail about some of the sites that are ongoing or in the process of starting. So, as mentioned, we cover a lot of different areas within housing growth. We have the sites that we have within our programme, which are council-owned, that we're looking to bring forward, but including the two strategic sites at Bradley Park and Dewsbury Riverside. We also work with funding bodies, with West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Homes England, for any opportunities and funding programmes that they have. So, for example, the Accelerated Construction Programme, which has been touched on in terms of the Sut Hill site, which uses Homes England funding. We work on the Town Centre Living the town centre living plans linked to the blueprints, and we're looking at specific properties within Huddersfield Town Centre and within Daisy Hill using the Towns Fund funding. We work and sit on specialist supported housing forums within the council, and we work closely with colleagues in housing services and planning to secure affordable homes, and we do a lot of work talking to registered providers about the developments they are doing it off their own merit, but also ones where we look to partner with them to deliver the council sites. As Joanne's touched on, we do have a pipeline of sites which will come forward following the ones that we've got on site at the moment. And we also have a brokerage programme which looks at sites which are maybe stalled in the system or where developers might need a bit of advice, where we can give a bit of a bit of specialist knowledge or help with partnership working with developers or registered providers who are interested in investing within Kirklees. The second part of the report touches on first homes, which is a very specific technical element linked to our affordable housing role. So within our service, we do consult on planning applications and we provide specialist advice. Previously, there's been discounted market housing, there's been starter homes, and the latest iteration of kind of government discounted housing is first homes, which is part of the affordable housing that has to be delivered for housing sites across the district. So the Appendix 2 covers the role and responsibility of our team and in delivering and managing the process and the suggested charges to cover some of that responsibility that we have. But I think the main body of the report, which I'll move on to without delay, is talking about the actual sites where we've been making progress or we have things on site. But please go back to the beginning of the report and ask questions after I've done this, if that's okay. So I'll give a brief summary in order in terms of the sites. There's a lot of work going into each one of these sites, and I'll try and answer your questions to the best of my ability, but there's lots of project managers working on different elements. So the first site is Bradley Park. So a large allocation within the Kirklees local plan. The council owns a significant chunk of the site. We've been working using West Yorkshire Combined Authority funding on feasibility work. And subject to the Cabinet decision last week, we have an allocated budget to take that feasibility work forward, looking at taking the site to the next steps and looking to appoint a partner or a developer moving forwards, and that work will progress. In terms of Dewsbury Riverside, the largest allocation in the local plan, we own approximately, the council owns 30 hectares of a 160 hectare site. There's been a lot of work that we've been doing recently to relocate allotments to facilitate the central access into the site, where we've constructed 43 replacement allotments of the 25 that are there. We've also had a strategic planning decision last November on the first phase application for up to 350 homes on the council's land. We've been working collaboratively with West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Homes England, and we've been looking at the master plan and reviewing where suitable based on the changes that have happened since the local plan was adopted. So we've got the benefit of the Transpennine route upgrade and the new station, which will be built on site. We've replaced the allotments, and we're kind of reflecting and reacting on any planning policy changes that have happened till then. So there'll be more work going forwards, including some significant engagement with the community over the next 12 months in taking Dewsbury Riverside to the next stages of development. The next item in the report is the town centre living plan. So we've touched on that in terms of the links to the investment in Huddersfield Town Centre and the Huddersfield Blueprint, the two buildings that we're focused on at this moment in time. Estate buildings opposite the train station and Somerset buildings near St Peter's Gardens. We've been working with 13 Housing Group, who are a North East based Homes England strategic partner who deliver affordable homes, but also have worked on town centre regeneration in the North East and elsewhere. They are currently looking at the possibilities of regenerating and reusing those buildings for housing. So over the next year, we'll be working alongside them and supporting them to look at those options and hopefully move forward on that positively in terms of creating town centre living opportunities. 103 New Street, which is nearly at completion, we've supported that project, and that is nearly for student accommodation, which is has people living there currently, and I think it's almost at the point of completion there. Moving on to Dewsbury, we have the Daisy Hill neighbourhood. So that is a key project within the Dewsbury Blueprint. It's in the town investment plan alongside the other projects that got Towns Fund funding. So Fieldhouse was mentioned in Joanne's presentation. So Fieldhouse is a privately owned regeneration scheme reusing a listed building opposite the train station with grant funding support. The other elements of Daisy Hill neighbourhood that we've been leading on are looking at acquisition of properties to create a critical mass of an opportunity for investors and developers to come to create a higher end housing opportunity or housing investment to kind of harness the benefits of the other schemes within Dewsbury, and also the benefit of the Transpennine route upgrade and the ability to commute to other places for work and for leisure, but whilst regenerating the centre of Dewsbury Town Centre. So there was an update report taken to Dewsbury Town Board, which is available to look at online, which sets out the acquisitions that we managed to get over the line this year in terms of properties that we've bought and some of the plans for the next steps. We used some West Yorkshire Combined Authority funding last year as well to look at feasibility and the opportunities for that area, and we'll be taking that forward, looking at the opportunities for housing alongside Simon's team and the other town centre investment programme. Specialist and supported housing. These sites, we can use the council's land. They take a lot of effort and energy and don't always deliver the numbers, but they can deliver some real benefits. So the example here of Mayman Lane, where there's some specialist accommodation for people with profound learning needs, was developed in partnership using NHS funding and working with other authorities. We're always looking for the opportunities to do that with the sites that we have in our programme, alongside the other types of delivery that we're looking at around low carbon and affordables. And there are some other examples there, Nabcroft Lane in Crossland Moor near the David Brown factory, which Unity Housing registered provider. We've got some bungalows for older people, and some accommodation for people who've recently been homeless, kind of gateway properties as well, which was a real success story. Moving on to some of the other sites where we are partnering with private sector developers, but there's added value in terms of what Joanne and Councillor Turner touched on before. So we have a partnership with Keepmoat Homes and Equans to deliver Ashbrow. So we're delivering a significant number of market homes, a proportion of affordable homes, but also the extra care scheme which Equans are delivering, which will be a really kind of beneficial extra care facility for that part of Huddersfield. And we're hoping that will be complete, the extra care will be complete in September 2024. But the show home is open and properties have been sold on that site, so progress has really been made, and it's taken a lot of resources and officer time to help assist the developers because of the wider economic context of what's been happening over the last couple of years. Lots of developers have struggled, and we've been there to really try and support them where we can. And an exemplar of that as well, I think, is Kenmore Drive, where Housing 21, a specialist extra care provider, they have purchased the site off the council, but their contractor went out of business last year. So they have now successfully, I understand, appointed a new contractor, so it's added a bit of time to the programme, but hopefully they will soon be on site again to construct an 80-bed extra care facility on another of the council's formerly council-owned housing allocations or housing sites in the north of the district. Going back to what I was touching on around 13 groups, the capacity and what they can bring to the table, and our desire to use council-owned sites for affordable, low-carbon developments. The Registered Providers Cluster Programme was an opportunity of 5 council sites where it was competitively tendered, and 13 group with a successful bidder. That is all about delivering affordable homes on these sites, but also looking at how high they can push the standards around zero carbon and low carbon. So they're looking at every site individually and thinking how they can balance those needs that Joanne was touching on around the costs of affordable homes, but also homes that are affordable to live in terms of installation, reducing the cost of heating, and responding to the upcoming building regulation changes where we'll be in a kind of a non-gas environment. So each site has to adapt to its own quirks and situation in terms of solar gain and the orientation of the sites. It's fair to say most sites in Kirklees have some kind of challenge that means you have to have a bit of pragmatism, but they're looking at each site and they're doing a community engagement and looking at social value as well as part of their specific policies that they have. Accelerated construction programme, so we touched on that. That covers the Sut Hill site. So just over £4.5 million of Homes England investment was leveraged to support that scheme, and the conditions related to that funding are around pace of delivery to ensure that we deliver, that Keepmo, the partner there, delivers homes quickly, but also embedding modern methods of construction. So Councillor Turner touched on the timber frame, and it's a local Dewsbury-based company that are being used for that timber frame construction, and we've been on site and they are making good progress, and that will also have 65 affordable homes as part of the wider development of market housing as well. Touched previously on the housing brokerage service, so we work with the planning policy team to look at sites where perhaps things have stalled for various different reasons or haven't necessarily come forward yet in terms of housing sites, and look to try and pull together some intelligence and share where suitable information about sites that may have stalled with interested partners who come to us and show that they're interested in investing in Kirklees. And that's a piece of ongoing work which we'll continue to do. But we're there as an open door for people to approach us as well if there's a sticking point in terms of perhaps they don't know who to approach in terms of getting their housing sites to the next step, whether it's looking at pre-application advice, or they need some viability advice, or they just need point in the right direction, or they might have some kind of sticking point around land ownership. We're there to use our knowledge and expertise, or hopefully point people in the right direction. An example of that is the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Brownfield Housing Fund, where that was a central government scheme apportioned to different combined authorities, and we worked with different private sector landowners or developers who had specific brownfield sites with challenges and supported them in terms of applying directly to the combined authority. And a couple of those sites I think are moving through the process and have been successful. Finally, just touching on our pipeline of sites. So the original 41 sites which were approved at Cabinet in 2018 and updates have previously been taken, we managed to get West Yorkshire Combined Authority funding last year to do some due diligence, to look at the sites in more detail, look at the possibilities of what could come forward on those sites and how best to put those to the market. We're reflecting on that now, and we will look at kind of bringing those sites forward and thinking creatively in the same way that we did with the Registered Providers Cluster Programme and in Kenmore Drive, and talking to colleagues across the council in housing services and in specialist accommodation services to see what the best option for disposal is, and we'll bring those back to the appropriate cabinets and portfolio holders at the appropriate time. And finally, the table provides a summary of what has been delivered, or what is being delivered, or what will be delivered in the near future around our programme. I won't go into forensic detail, but if you've got any specific questions about those sites, then please let me know.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for that very thorough overview. I just want to make a comment. I really like the way you've structured the appendix and the images, because it brings it a bit to life. I don't know if everybody else agrees with me, but thank you so much for that. That really made it an easy read for me. Any comments and questions from the panel members? Councillor Taylor?
I was trying to avoid going first. I seem to go first. Thank you, Thomas. A fair number of comments and questions, if I'm honest. But I'd like to start really with a question around, there's a number of comments in the front report which talks about responding to needs of the population and meeting local needs. I'd be interested in knowing how you define that, because I've asked in the past, I'm a huge advocate of Place Standard. I've run 3 Place Standard initiatives within my ward. In all of them, housing's come out as a key need. But the types of housing that we're proposing to build doesn't match with what's coming out in Place Standard. So when you talk about local needs, how are you defining local? And also, who are you asking? Because the question I've asked before, and I've never really had answered, is if you're looking at building houses in Kirkburton Ward, who are you asking what their need for housing in that area is? Is it the people who live there? Because invariably it's people buy houses who live elsewhere, and they may not even live within our district. So how do you come up with this idea that we understand what local needs are? It makes reference in 3.3 about using intelligence and information. But where are we getting that intelligence and information from? Because when I've asked to see the evidence, because it is about evidence, nothing ever comes forward. I've got a lot of other questions, but I don't know whether you want to take that one first, perhaps. And
Thomas, do you want to come in for that question?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, I think obviously every site has its own specific needs, and the comments around need cover that generic point. But I think there are 2 parts to it, I suppose. There is the need and demand as set out in the more technical sense, the strategic housing market assessment, which looks at the need across Kirklees, and that feeds into the local plan housing numbers, and it also forms the basis of how responses to planning applications about the types of affordable homes that are needed. So there's that kind of the technical breakdown of the quantum of need and the different tenures. But I think in terms of engaging with communities when there are sites that are coming to delivery or we're in development stages, there are examples of what we are doing to get that local intelligence and that local knowledge. So for example, with Dewsbury Riverside, before we submitted the planning application, we instigated Place Standard engagement, listening to Thornhill Leith, listening to Ravensthorpe, and we fed that, we linked that specifically to the next stage, and we fed that information into the planning application. And what we're doing now, we're working with Homes England's community engagement specialists and developing the inclusive communities framework that's tailored for Dewsbury Riverside. So we're really looking at the opportunities and the possibilities to kind of not only engage with the community to understand what they want, not just around the homes but the place, and also add that element of social value to it. So in terms of a strategic side, I think that's what we're focusing on Dewsbury Riverside. I know the Register Provider Cluster Programme, working with 13 Group, they have some best practice and have started to engage. I'm not quite as close to those projects, but Joanne might want to come in on that.
I think sometimes it's also about quantum, isn't it? And Dewsbury Riverside, as well as Bradley, is quite a large development for us. So our inclusive communities framework allows us to have a conversation with those residents in the area of that. But your point, Councillor Taylor, about who are these homes for, it is well made. You know, quite often new housing growth brings in people from wider across the district, etc. So one of the things that we do look at is we look with colleagues across adults and children's to understand what are the pressures. We work with homes and neighbourhoods to understand what is the demographic of people within their portfolio and what is their level of income. Would they be able to move on to other properties from social housing, etc. If Richard Parry was here, the DAS, he would be saying more extra care in different areas is absolutely what we need. So you'll see front and centre of a number of our key reports here today that building extra care and the right type of extra care is important. So it's not as simple as addressing the need in a particular area. It is much wider. And let's be honest, we do also use expertise from other areas. Thomas has mentioned 13 Group. They're exceptionally good at putting down pockets of housing in particular areas that address that wider need. So one of the housing sites that 13 Group are doing for us through the RP clusters that Thomas has mentioned is in Cowersley. It's on the edge of the social housing site in Cowersley, and this will be affordable housing. So this allows move on accommodation, so people can aspire to move on. So some of what we're doing will hopefully free up the social housing supply chain to move that forward. But it's not an exact science.
John, do you want a supplementary there?
Yeah, I just want to come back on that. You've talked a lot about our social, the housing and the land that we have, but also as a council, we, through our planning and through Section 106 requirements, specify the types of affordable housing that's built on privately developed areas as well. And in my patch, there are two needs. There are needs for, well, what do we call them now? First homes, starter homes. A developer wanted to build more on their site and were restricted by us. They were only allowed to build 8 and they sold within 5 minutes of going on the market, which shows the demand is there, but they weren't allowed to build any more. They were told they had to build for private renting, which is not the need that there is. There are people who want to buy in the villages that they grew up in. Similarly, there is a need for downsizing. We've got a lot of residents that are in bigger houses that, the children have, moved out. In some cases, they've lost their partner and they're living alone and they need to downsize, but they don't want to move away from the village and the community and the connections that they have. And again, we're not addressing that because we're saying, well, affordable housing is the requirement. We need you to build, for private renting or for social housing. And actually, that doesn't address the need of these individuals. So we end up with people left in larger properties that could be suitable for a family because there's nowhere for them to move to. So when I talk and when I read about responding to local needs and using intelligence to help us, that's what I'm talking about. And that came through very, very strongly in all of my place standard pieces of work that I've done. And yet as a council, we don't seem to be tackling or addressing that. And every time I ask the question, I get this kind of, well, we look at these, what was it, the strategic housing assessment and the overall picture across whole of Kirklees. Well, the need in some of my small communities is probably very, very different from those in Ravensthorpe or in urban areas. And you can't just have one size fits all. We say that all the time about Kirklees. Yet when it comes to housing, we do seem to treat it like that.
Joanna?
I think our work with Place Standard Inclusive Communities framework would suggest that we don't treat it like that, but I do appreciate Councillor Taylor's comment. One of the things that we do in the area that Thomas works in is we do have the brokerage service around working with other developers to stimulate other interest, and certainly downsizing, particularly for people who are asset rich, but perhaps not necessarily living an affluent lifestyle because they've put most of their funding into the houses, that the building of bungalows and 1 and 1.5 story houses is not necessarily something that private developers are focusing on now. And that's because there's not necessarily as much commerciality around that and as much profitability for them. So one of the things that I'll ask us to do, to take away, to go and have a conversation with Matthias and colleagues in planning, is around downsizing for older residents that's not extra care.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler?
So, something that's been a bugbear with me.
I'm being promoted.
Apologies, Councillor Tyler.
Oh, sorry,
Was before you. Sorry.
No. Am I right to? No. I want to Graham to go first. Is that right?
Is that all right, Graham?
Yeah, I just want to pick up the issue of downsizing, for instance. Something that's been a bugbear of me for many years has been the fact that we don't build enough bungalows in Kirklees. I can't tell you how many conversations over the years I've had with developers. I once kept a letter from one saying we're not going to build them because we can make more money building other houses. So it's getting the developers to see the benefits of bungalows. I think 2-bedroom bungalows, they claim that they use too much land. I'm not convinced by that argument. They just want to build houses which, from their point of view quick and easy. And someone who was downsized, and he's not asset rich, by the way, for the record, someone who was downsized, it is a challenge. It is absolutely a challenge. I get that. It took me quite a while. But unless developers bite the bullet and build bungalows or build 1.5 stories, then we're a bit stuck. And it's that private development that's a problem, because don't forget, most of the houses are delivered by the private sector. And whilst they stick to the guns as bungalows aren't profitable enough, they use too much land, you want to do this, we're going to be stuck with that. So we need to try and change the mindset of developers, really, or find, when the planning reforms finally come out of government, perhaps there's some extra powers in there for us to be able to enforce more bungalows, etc. But you're right, downsizing is absolutely a challenge, I can assure you.
Councillor John Taylor for your supplementary. And that's your last one, because I'll have to move on to
I have got
Councillor
other questions later. I'll come back with
Yeah,
other
yeah,
questions
sure,
later.
yeah.
But just on that one, Graham, I actually have a developer who's interested in building some bungalows up in Grange Moor, so we have got one on side, and they've got a site up in Grange Moor, they're going to bring them forward as bungalows. So, you know, that's one little positive. I appreciate Joanne's comment about taking this away and looking at, but I think we do need to recognise that, you know, different areas are different. And I just wonder if, again, it's really one for Matthias and the team to look at in terms of the additional planning, I can't remember what the terminology is, you know, what do we call it, where we do additional policies? Thank you. Supplementary planning guidance is whether there's anything we could do with that in terms of bungalows. But it's probably worth a conversation, or perhaps something we could ask Matthias to maybe come and comment on at some point.
Just quickly, I think one of the problems we've got is we don't know what's coming with the planning changes. I mean, we seem to be doing consultations every few weeks, so yes, you might be right, which might be something, but I think what we really need is the government to get a shift on and get this bloody planning sorted out, because everybody's in limbo. We don't quite know what's going to happen, and it's really difficult when you don't know what's going to happen to start things like the local plan. So we need them to get a shift on and get this thing through. It's been dragging around for what seems forever now.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler.
Thank you. Just on the sort of registering interest, I do own a bungalow, which I'm trying to sell at present. And sort of the reality I'm experiencing is very much in line with what Graham was discussing there, is that over the past, I've owned the property for 7 years and it's appreciated by 10 grand a year. The lack of supply and the increase in demand is just obscene, really, at the moment. It's definitely something... yes, well, I've just outed myself there, but there you go. But the sort of comment I wanted to make, particularly around this document, was more, you know, not too many specifics, but broadly about how this fits into the local plan. Because just on page 23, the overall delivery position, the total cumulative is 2,124, as it's showing at the moment. Now, I understand these are just a number of strategic sites that we're looking at. But that is quite a way off what the local plan envisaged at the start, which I believe was to the tune of about 30,000 properties, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Might be overstating that a bit, actually, from memory. But I'm just, you know, for reasons that I imagine are to do with sort of market conditions and how, you know, the difficulties developers have faced in recent years with inflation, as a prime example of that in more recent times. Is that the feedback that has been received from some of the developers that we know of? And also, will we be looking at sort of rescheduling our ambition, I think, in terms of the local plan in the near future?
Joanna or Councillor Turner?
I'll go quickly. You mentioned the figure of 2,124 against the local plan target. Don't forget, the majority of the local plan is not our delivery, that's the private sector. So that's probably where we would expect to be. But the majority of the local plan sites are the private sector, not us. So that's our little bit of it. The rest we rely on the private sector investing in building them for us.
Joanna?
Chair, Councillor Turner's made one of the points that I was going to make, which is that we are a small proportion of that leverage in our own sites, but we do have the brokerage service, and Thomas has already mentioned about the brokerage, so perhaps if Thomas could outline the key sort of things that have come back to us around some of the stall sites, it might give panel a flavour then of what the industry is facing. Before he does that, I would say one of the key impacts has been one of the impacts on our own capital plan, which is the cost of materials and the cost of labour.
Thomas?
Yeah, I think we have recently started to reach out again. We have ongoing conversation with our own current partners, but also speaking to developers and landowners about why sites haven't come forward. I think there has been some uncertainty about development finance, about fluctuations in market values, but going back further, I think there have been certain economic shocks which have led to cost price inflation, and our partners have been coming back quite regularly saying that the cost of materials and labour have been increasing. So when you've got falling opportunities for finance, you've got falling values, and you've got increasing costs the other way. I think some people have just elongated their programme in terms of what they're going to build and when they're going to build it. Some contractors have gone out of business, for example, the one at Kenmore Drive. And I think that has had a knock-on impact on the delivery of housing numbers in Kirklees as well as other places. But I think also I could see some positivity and some green shoots in terms of things do seem to be moving in the right direction in terms of sites are starting to come forward. But I think I think COVID had an impact in terms of the ways of working as well, and getting through the planning system as well, which I think we're aware of, and we're working to address those things as well.
Thank you. Any supplementary, Councillor Tyler?
Just more thanks for the information, and thank you, Graham, as well for the context of that. It's in line with our sort of our own developments as a council. I just think it is important in sort of meetings like this that we do keep reminding people of the sort of challenges that we've been going through over the past few years and how that has greatly impacted particularly the building of houses. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I've still got more questions, sorry. But just comment on the last one. I was talking to a developer 3 weeks ago who was saying he's seeing softening sales at the moment. And that's that uncertainty around mortgage rates. And again, that's going to have an impact because they'll slow their build if you've got that. That's just a comment rather than asking anyone to comment on. I just want to come back to First Homes, this new scheme that's coming in. Again, talking to a developer recently with the previous scheme, which I think was, I can't remember what it was called, the last one, but the previous one for discounted first-time buyer properties, the age range that we have as a council went up to, I think it was 40. What the developer was saying to me is they're starting to see first-time buyers coming forward who are over 40, who are falling outside of the scheme, and that's a recognition of house prices being so high. It's taking people longer before they're in a position where they've got the capital together to put their kind of deposit in. So I just wonder if we could take I don't necessarily need an action to look at, if we are bringing in this new scheme, is there an opportunity for us as a council? Because I understand that the previous scheme was a government scheme where there was some flexibility around how the council adopted it. I'm guessing this might be the same. So it's just having a look at, is there any wriggle room to just extend a little bit that first? They still have to be a first-time buyer, but they might be 42 or something. At the moment, they just fall outside of the criteria.
Thomas?
Just if you want to answer.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Taylor. It is a government revision, so the First Homes policy is set by government, and I know there are, I'm not claiming to be an expert in this, we work with our planning policy colleagues, there's a First Homes guidance document which is on the website, the council's website, and provides the specific requirements within Kirklees. I know some are set as mandatory requirements by government, there's income thresholds. I think the age range is probably one of those that isn't flexible as well, but I think there is some other flexibility around some of those other elements, but we'll certainly go away and look at that, because I think it's, I don't disagree with what we're hearing as well and what we all experience, so we'll take that away and look into it.
Thank you for that, Thomas. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Taylor again.
Yeah, sorry. On the housing delivery plan update, the appendix, really. Thank you for this. I agree with the chair that having the pictures helps. It always does, doesn't it? However, I'm going to be a little bit critical, if I may. There are areas where there's a lot of information, but not necessarily updates or sort of indications of when things will happen. I mean, if I take an example of the town centre living 2.1, we talk about working with the 13 group for up to 18 months. And then we just kind of say a further report will be up to cabinet when the outcome of the work is complete. So almost we're going to tell you nothing for 18 months. And it's that kind of thing where it feels like there ought to be some more frequent updates. Now, I understand now from your explanation, this was a report that was taken to cabinet. But for us as a scrutiny committee, you know, I'm going, so am I not going to find anything out for 18 months? It does feel like that's an awful long time. Similarly, on the one about Kenmore Drive, which is 3.1 under the extra care stuff, it was good to hear today about the Housing 21 have found an alternative developer, because the developer went into administration. But again, it asks the question, are we looking at our policies and our procurement policies? And if we have got a developer that's going into administration, if there are others that are vulnerable, are we looking at the risk, and have we got that on our risk register in any way around? Is there anything we can learn from that experience to avoid it perhaps happening to us on one of our other sites? And then if I may also on that, it makes reference to a grant agreement to provide 500k of Section 106 funding. Section 106 is an issue for me, because I have a number of developments in my own patch where we're struggling to get the Section 106 money spent. Where's this Section 106 money? I don't understand how we're using Section 106 money to support the houses and where that money came from. If anybody's able to answer that.
Joanna?
So just a couple of questions.
I'll try and come back on them all in order, but I must admit I've just had a moment of middle-agedness. What was your first point?
The first one was really some of the detail. There's no, you know, it's saying like it'll be 18 months before the report's complete. You know, surely there should be some updates at some point.
So that specifically was on 13 group. So in terms of 13 group, we commissioned them to undertake a piece of work. That piece of work will be back at the autumn. With that type of work, there's no sort of update as to where they are. We commission a piece and they'll bring that back. But you're quite right, we could have put on there that there's some work to do to bring back in the autumn. In terms of due diligence around contractors and procurement, I have to say it was a surprise to everybody in the sector when this particular contractor went into administration. We as an authority were not exposed in the council, but the housing revenue account was exposed because they were in contract with this particular contractor, although at a very early stage. A significant amount of registered providers were in contract with that contractor as well, so it was a surprise. We do limit our exposure where appropriate, but one of the sad facts is that occasionally contractors do go bust, and we have to understand how we take action on that. We do, in the event of a contractor going into administration, have a set of procedures around site securing and materials securing, etc., that the head of audit and risk, Mr. Martin Durnley, has worked with us on. So I'm quite comfortable with that. In terms of 106, we have an audit trail for all the 106 we use. We regularly use 106 money around affordable homes or money in lieu of affordable home provision. And so there will be an audit trail for that 500,000 and we'll be able to supply it. Thomas, I don't know if you wanted to add anything further on the 106.
Councillor Turner?
Just going back to Kenmore Drive and the fact that the contractor on that site went bust or closed down. It's always challenging, John, because you can do as much due diligence as you want on companies, but what they do is they hide the financial liabilities and their problems until the last minute, because once it gets out there that they're struggling, it usually causes the demise of the company anyway. So they're very good some of these companies hiding the financial difficulties and the problems they've got until they get to the point where, hang on a minute, we're going to fall over, so we have to go bust. So it's always a challenge, and you know, you can look back through history of how many companies people said, well, they were still travel agents, they were still taking bookings. Well, of course they were, because if they said they couldn't honour their debts, they go bust. So it's that hiding of it that's the problem, and the system allows them to do that almost, doesn't it? Because some of these companies don't face the scrutiny that perhaps we would like. Perhaps sometimes the directors are trying to protect the business and trying to protect their own investments. So it's always a challenge, but I can assure you, and as Joanna alluded to, Martin does all our due diligence, and I can assure you that Martin is very thorough, and we will do everything we can to protect our interests. But unfortunately, companies will go bust, unfortunately. It's the nature of the beast.
Supplementary, or are you happy with that?
And I'm happy with that, but I've got another question. It's on the affordable housing ownership fee charging. Don't have an issue with it at all, other than we've come out with some random figures. You know, making a fee of £348.73. Why wouldn't it be just £350? And £394.79, just say 400. I mean, to actually go to a developer or even a customer and say we want a fee of £394.79 just seems a bit daft. I don't know where we are with adopting that yet, but if perhaps we could take the view of scrutiny that maybe rounding up might be a sensible thing to do.
Joanna?
It was agreed at Cabinet last week. We are very clear where we shouldn't be making money out of something, and this income should only be covering our costs of this, because it's for first homes. And so we did have a very exacting figure. I take your comments back for next time, but we do want to make sure that we're incredibly transparent around where those figures have come from.
You could always round down rather than round up, but it just seems a daft thing to put out there. Graham's going to round up.
Okay, thank you. I'll make one final comment or / question before we wrap up this actual particular item, because I'm conscious we've got one more item to go. So my question is, obviously I understand we've got private developers that we procure to set and build a certain number of units for us. And I know in terms of the social housing aspect, we are in oversubscribed demand in certain housing market stock. So for example, 3 to 4 bedrooms are very much in demand, but we don't have the stock there. The figures that you've put on page 23, whilst they are there, it doesn't break down actually what the stock is in terms of what you're asking of these housing developers. Does it actually negate some of the issues that we have in the social housing sector?
So we can bring you back a breakdown of the size and type of stock around that. Obviously, generally first homes are generally 1 or 2 bed. With that, what I would say is that none of this that we've got in front of you today is social housing. So Nelson Parker and Homes and Neighbourhoods have their own social housing growth programme. A small one, but equally as important. What we're doing here is providing alternatives, either purchase, rental, for move-on accommodation, which can, in some instances, free up the social housing. But we'll provide you with a mix of the unit size on that.
Thank you for that clarity. It's just more focusing on the rental side of things for 3 to 4 beds. So it'd be appreciative if you could bring the breakdown back. In terms of what the stocking market is in terms of bedrooms. So we'll close that item there. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Joanne, for that. And we'll move on to the next item, which is item 8, which is the Small Centres Programme, and I believe...
Yeah, I'll do a quick introduction.
Councillor Turner's going to make a quick introduction first.
So, thank you, Chair. So this is a report on the progress on our Small Town Centres Programme. As you'll see, there's 4 town centres we've been concentrating on, with the possibility of looking longer term at Marsden in light of some low funding we received. As you see, there's been a lot of work to get to this stage. Some are more advanced than others. Some have been more challenging than others as well, shall we say. But at least we're making progress, and we have been able to lever in some extra funding from UK SPF, some external funding from Transforming Cities, etc. So we are levering external funding in to help us deliver these. Obviously, with the cost pressures that's on there, that extra external funding is to be welcomed. But I'm sure Simon will give you a bit more detail on this now.
Simon.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Can I just have, I've just noticed I've opened this up and I want to link up to the screen, but I haven't got the Teams link in my appointment. Could somebody send me that and I'll just get the short presentation up? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Jenny will do that. Couple of minute break whilst we get that sorted. Thank you. Okay. Simon, do you
Okay,
want...
thank you for that, Chair. Apologies for not having the correct link. So I just want to bring you up to speed with the local centres programme that we've been running for the last couple of years. I think in summary, really, it's 4 towns, 4 continuous engagement programmes, 4 master plans and 4 sets of sort of projects that we're trying to get off the ground. And this is part and parcel of us as a council trying to strengthen local centres, because we recognise as those as important places for people to live and work and do all sorts of business. So it's a really important programme from that perspective. And I've said 4, it has now sort of been expanded to include a fifth centre, which I'll come to in a moment. So I'm just going to run through some of the basics. There's quite a lot of work that's been going on, and it's been quite a feat managing all 4 at the same time. So I just want to sort of move on to Batley. Batley's only first on here because it begins with a B. Largely, Batley has been overtaken by a levelling up process. And in many ways, it's one of the sort of success stories of starting to develop plans and programmes in a particular area. I definitely feel that without the work that we've carried out around local centres, our levelling up bid in round 2 would have been extremely weak. So it has helped us enormously. We've gone from a small allocation of £2.5 million, and we bumped that right up to 14.38 million, which is a fantastic achievement. And we're on with trying to develop that. In terms of the process that we've gone through with Batley, we carried out place standard exercises very early, used that to inform the master planning process. We also did some extra stuff in Batley because we had some extra funding from a Batley Streets for People programme. We carried that out just before the place standard stuff. So we had some idea of what people were wanting around our town centre. Once we'd used that information, we fed that into the master plan. We engaged on that back end of last year. And during the process that we were developing the levelling up bid, and I'll come to that in a moment, we engaged quite intensely with businesses. And there was lots of ward councillor and certainly lots of MP involvement at that stage. So in terms of our programme for Batley, we're concentrating now on Commercial Street, which is the main street that runs through the middle of Batley. We're looking again at how we can improve Marketplace. We're also trying to make sure that link, for those people who know Batley, between Commercial Street and Tesco's is better formed. If you don't know it, you get to the edge of Commercial Street and you've got a sheer drop of about 5 metres before you can get into the Tesco's premises, which is not very good for movement between the two facilities. And there's also a large building on Commercial Street that has been vacant for a number of years. It was formerly the Woolies building there. It's now known as the former JBM building, but that's not been around for a long time. But it's the largest building on that block. Needs some repair, and we're using some of the money to bring that up to a white box standard. So levelling up means that we didn't have to necessarily make a choice in Batley. We can do all of this simultaneously. Well, that's a theory. We'd got a successful outcome early part of this year. The decision process was somewhat delayed, and we're adding into that £1.5 million of council capital and the remainder of the Streets for People funding, which is 880,000. That money comes from the West Yorkshire Local Transport Plan funds. All of this has now got cabinet endorsements. That went last week. So what that means is we can now got authority to use the grant money, and it establishes that match funding to move forward. In terms of levelling up, we've completed the first stages with the Department for Levelling Up at Homes and Communities. That's now, the MOU is now signed, and we now have a project team in place, and they're starting to work on that. First phase of that will be definitely looking at costs again. There's been a massive gap between the work we did on levelling up and today. And in that intervening time, there's been quite a few changes to inflation. It fluctuated quite a lot towards the back end of last year, upwards. So we know that some of those costs might not be as accurate now as we need. So we're having to review that. But our relationship with DLUC is quite mature. They understand all these problems that local authorities face, and it's very much part and parcel of that, of the process that we need to go through. So Batley looking very healthy in terms of the amount of money that's coming. The next phase is about delivery, and we will continue to engage with communities and businesses and ward councillors and the MP about the project as we move through these next stages. That's an absolutely essential part of the next stages. Just want to move on to Kirklees. Kirklees was one of the programmes that we got off the ground pretty quickly, worked through the process pretty rapidly. We did a scrutiny session, I think earlier this year at the end of the master plan programme. What we've followed there is almost an identical process to the Batley one. Place standards, engagement, using the ward councillors here as key reference points. And we find ourselves now with a completed master plan and a number of key schemes that ward councillors and communities want us to deliver. And they are projects around Savoy Square, which is a piece of public realm at the front of the market. Hopefully a look at the external appearance of the market itself. A project around Spen Bottoms. Now, Spen Bottoms is open land that encaptures some lakes. It encaptures a viaduct that links the town centre to communities towards Gomersall. And it's a project around opening up public access to outdoor activity, very popular during the consultation process, and we're trying to look at that as a sort of potential project to enhance the attractiveness of Cleckheaton. There's also another project in that priority list which is called Market Square, and that's a piece of public ground to the bottom of the town, and we've linked that to Transforming Cities funding, and that's likely to be delivered ahead of most other things because we can deliver that this year. So that's a good way to splice different funding streams together and bring things forward in a slightly quicker programme than if it was just left to a single funding stream. So Cleckheaton looking healthy, gone through lots of work, but again I need to underline the fact that this is a constant process of engaging back with communities as these projects start to get developed and become more detailed. Heckman White, slightly behind the others, but we're now just at the end of the master plan consultation period. That ended on the 19th of June. So the team, headed up by Isabel, who's here today, are examining all those results. We put forward a number of projects in that plan. Greenside Public Realm, which is around a potential road closure to the top side of Greenside to bring the park closer to properties, and that's close to the bus station, and also a potential sort of library community hub facility right at the heart of the town centre, close to Morrison's, on the old Market Hall site, which has been vacant for a very long time. So we're examining the results from the consultation to see whether or not the place standards stuff was right and see what the public think of some of those ideas. So we're sort of midway through that process. There is other funding going into Heckman White, and that comes from West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and I think it's something that was perhaps missed off in the earlier conversation. Heckman White bus station will get delivered this year, and there's almost £5 million going into that project. There are some other works on the A638 corridor, which are around traffic management in the town centre, but that's of lesser size than bus station itself. So we're quite hopeful that Heckman White, once we get through this next phase, will have some very clear projects that will be delivered, and hopefully that early project, the bus station, will kickstart this year. Holmfirth. Now, Holmfirth has been a programme of work for a number of years, and that really started with the Holmfirth Access Plan. That is very much close to being delivered. So we've come along since then and tried to wrap a sort of more generic and a more sort of town-wide plan around that. We've put into that mix another £1.5 million on top of the Holmfirth access plan, and that's for projects that will complement the town and also complement that particular scheme. Also, for quite a number of these town centres, secured UK SPF funding so that we can develop these projects rather than eat into council capital. We have done the place standard stuff. We have carried out master plan consultation. The master plan is completed, portfolios holders have signed that off, and aside from the access plan, there are 3 key projects that the community are pointing us towards. One is to look at Towngate and how that can better relate to the river and create more public realm, because public realm is at a real premium in places like Home Firth. Quiet spaces for people to dwell at the heart of the town is really important. Looking at access along the river at a number of points, so use the river as a way to guide people into the town, and a series of small-scale transport projects, including gateways into the town, park and stride, looking at the parking profile in Home Firth and how you get some parking at the edges of the town and get people to link in that way. So the main project there, as I say, is the access scheme. I think we've got a date, sort of September this year, for that to start. So that's an 18-month building programme. So the town will see a lot of activity from the end of the summer onwards. So a lot of these other projects will follow after that. We're very conscious of the fact that we don't want disruption to last years and years and years. So we will try to phase these in defined chunks to give businesses and residents a little bit of break from that sort of redevelopment activity. The last on a list, that run through them was the first 4. We've now added a 5th town to this, and I know that I get contacted quite a bit by ward councillors about extending the programme. Our ability to move outside of those 4 centres is constrained. It's constrained about in terms of resourcing, officer time. It's constrained in terms of the funding that we can put into these early phases. However, Marsden has largely popped onto our horizon for a number of reasons. One is a successful levelling up fund bid at the back end of last year. The other one is around the impending Transpennine route upgrade works, and that will particularly affect Marsden Station and the land around there. And some recent investment into the cycle path between Slowett and Marsden itself, which effectively completes that canal section linking back into Huddersfield. The Marsden Levelling Up Fund bid is the key one there. What you effectively have there is almost £20 million going into a derelict mill at the very heart of the town centre. The funding from Levelling Up is the gap funding. That's valued at almost £6 million. The rest of that will come from the private sector. But it is a significant change for that particular town centre, insofar as the mill covers such a large proportion of the town and conservation areas, so it will be quite impactful. It's a commercial project, largely sort of office space, workshops, some retail in there, with some potential for residential. Long term, the project is being run by the landowners and a developer partner, but ultimately it is a very significant change for Marsden. What we wanted to do by adding it to our list is ensure that there were some other plans for the rest of the town to complement that. So Cabinet have now agreed that we'll move forward on a master plan in Marsden, and we will kickstart that work quite quickly. My first port of call is back with the ward councillors. There's some very interested community groups in Marsden that have done some good work so far. Marsden's had a bit of an advantage because it did a very successful place standards exercise very recently. I think they had 600-700 respondents to that phase, which is pretty good. So Marsden is important. It's important in terms of all that additional funding, but also that relationship between us, the Manchester City region, and the Leeds City region, because it's quite a popular place to reside now. So Marsden's been added to that list alongside those other four. And I think that is the end of my short summary. I know it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of where we've been and where we're at right now.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for that whistle-stop tour. Any comments or questions on Simon's report or presentation? First time lost for words, panel members. No, Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Chair. I think I should start really by sort of thanking Simon and Graham for what they put into this. It's been really good engaging with Simon's team and also Councillor Turner. I know initially when the Levelling Up Fund bid was submitted, we had a bit of a argy-bargy, but it really has been great to work with you and see the work that you put into it. I think for us, as ward councillors and I think us working with community groups, we're really happy to see this investment that's going into Marsden. It's a significant chunk of money that is coming in to redevelop our community. But this project is really about making sure for us that development is sustainable and also community voices are heard. The place standards engagement in Marsden has been absolutely fantastic. We're just in the process of compiling all of the responses, and people in Marsden really do like to give you their views. They're very long and involved and make a lot of comments. And the Mills is one of the things that has come out of that. I think over 100 responses about, although I might be wrong about that, about the Mills. People talked about that. I think as councillors, we've communicated this with Graham and Simon as well. When we've been talking to each other, I think there's probably 2 or 3 kind of key things. The first one is making sure community voices are heard through the place standards engagement. The second one is about that sustainable development. We want to make sure that hopefully there are some public realm improvement works based around this project. We're a little bit concerned about Levelling Up Fund bid in the sense of, you know, this is still quite a small village and there's going to be quite a large commercial development in the centre of it. Marsden on the weekend, on a sunny weekday even, is heaving, and it's really difficult to find parking spaces, for example. Traffic on Brom Road is atrocious at the best of times. And then thirdly as well, kind of constantly exploring greater funding options. It's always very difficult because funding is very difficult to come by. But, you know, we've been talking with the heritage team regarding this development, but also the second large mill complex in the middle of the village. And also, hopefully, perhaps, there's all kinds of plots of land around the village that the Crowell family own. Hopefully, we can get some sort of affordable housing or some social housing as part of this development. It's very difficult, but I think if we think big, hopefully we can get something out of it. So yeah, those are. There was a question nested in there, but those are kind of the comments I would make.
Simon, do you want to come back on those comments?
Thanks for those, Councillor McCarthy. I think just on Marsden, yeah, I've certainly been to visit a number of times, and some of the community groups have toured me around, and I think one of the things you pick up on here around parking and the traffic there is definitely something that we ought to be focusing on through the sort of the planning stage that we've got a bit of extra funding for. So I think that'll be a complementary piece of work to the redevelopment of the mill. So I'm very happy to work with you on that. So.
Councillor Turner, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add that the Marsden one obviously came out because of the Levelling Up Fund, so we felt it right to look at it in the wider context of that funding coming through. So there is a lot of opportunity in Marsden, but there's a lot of work as well because, as Harry rightly points out, car parking is an issue. The traffic system's not great through there, but there is opportunities in the wider area to do something combined with the transparent upgrade that I think we could, in the next 5 to 10. And it is not, I have to be very clear, this is not going to happen next week. This is a long-term project because the other ones are ahead of them. So we need to get some of those done before we can concentrate our efforts, because we do have a small team and we do have a limited finance. But, this is a longer-term view on Marsden. I'm sure working with the community, and I know they have some fantastic people working in the community up there with a huge depth of knowledge, and we will be tapping into that and with regular meetings of the ward councillors. But this is an opportunity for the future that I think we should seize and move forward at some point, but not next week. But we will be doing something with the community and the ward councillors in Marsden. There is a fantastic opportunity for us all up there.
Thank you. Simon, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think the one thing I didn't pick up, Councillor McCarthy, is around exploring other funding options. And I think I said it in my short presentation that having a plan in place really helps you access other funding streams. It shows that the council and the community are working towards a shared vision. So I found it incredibly sort of encouraging that when they're in place, it does help you enormously to access that funding. So that puts Marsden on a good footing, so we can tout for other funding opportunities should they arise.
Councillor McCarthy, any supplementaries there?
Yeah, it's just, I wholeheartedly agree with what Simon just said about having that plan in place. If you've got a plan in place, you've got projects that are sort of shovel ready, for want of a better term. Finding funding is going to be much, much easier than applying for it, coming up with a scheme for each pot of money that becomes available. And it also means that these things kind of integrate with themselves. We're not just sort of have disjointed things here and there. I think one of the great benefits of doing something in Marsden is there has previously been blueprints drawn up as part of the Renaissance Town initiative, which was way beyond my time, but not beyond the time of the many groups that exist in Slough and Marsden. And, a lot of this work at exploring how we can improve the public realm in these two towns has already been done. And of course it has to be updated with new facts, and things have changed since then. But we can build upon the work that has already happened. So, absolutely, we're very much kind of willing to look at using those as well.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler, and then
Thank you, Ursula. Similar to Harry, I'll start with being very effusive in my praise of Graham, Simon and the team on this, because, you won't find I've been a massive fan of the Huddersfield blueprint and the blueprints that we've seen in Dewsbury as well. But it is so important that our communities further afield also get a benefit of investment into their areas, because not everyone identifies with Huddersfield or Dewsbury. They identify with the centres close to their home, and making sure they don't miss out on their investment in their areas is vital. Couple of questions about specifically one on the Home Firth development. They have the community market there, which is obviously right in the heart of Home Firth, and I know it's been discussed with the community market about sort of modernising that. I'm just wondering what discussions have gone on with the community market to support them in that, and a bit more broadly is that with the issues we're facing, or have been facing, we were talking a little earlier on that we're house building with developers have been facing, that those sorts of are we anticipating similar difficulties in actually delivering these projects in terms of the financial situation we now find ourselves in? But also, is there anything we can do to encourage sort of a circular economy and circular investment there, so that we are using, the local taxpayer power is being spent on local firms and to developing and building these? And I know that's sometimes not always possible, but I'm just wondering how that's been looked into. Thank you, Chair.
Simon?
Yeah, okay, just on Home Firth community market, it is up and running now, the community market. It's got a site down by the co-op. It's starting very small. I think it's got up to 6 stalls for the time being, but I think there's a longer term plan to grow that and shift it to the sort of more public space that's being created as part of the access plan. What I'm aware of is that there's been quite a lot of officer support from ourselves in town centres, but also our business team and the markets team to help just get that off the ground. So there has been some support, and it is up and running. In terms of delivery and using sort of local sort of trades and getting some local input, is very much as parcel of our procurement process. Does allow us to bring in social value, which can include some of that stuff. And I think with some of our smaller projects, I think we'll have ample opportunity to test that market out. We're not really in control of the access plan stuff, and it is fairly it's a wide-ranging project with some real specific skills in that. So we have had to tender outside to a large contractor, but I'm sure there's some local labour going into that as well. So it is part of our remit to try and address those issues.
Isabel, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll just come in on that. So in terms of, obviously, we've procured Tilbury Douglas, who's the main contractor, but their work is all about bringing in local companies to allow them to deliver, but also bringing in schools and having apprenticeships. We've just appointed a local public liaison officer, so someone local, to manage the scheme and be the first point of contact. So where we can, we're bringing in local people.
Councillor Turner?
Yeah, just a quick update on the market. I had a meeting with one of the sort of representative of Home Firth, if you like, only last week, and said that it's starting off small. As I said, probably about six stalls at the moment, but hopefully it'll grow. These things do take a little bit of time to get established and grow, but the feedback I got last week, and it was a very brief conversation, so we were very time limited, was that so far they were feeling quite positive about it. So hopefully going forward that'll expand and grow a little bit more.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler, any supplementaries on that one?
Yeah, just on sort of the presentation itself, really, as well. Fantastic presentation. It really encouraged a bipartisan effort here, as me and John were trying to figure out which graphics linked to which of the areas that we were talking about. So that was quite good. But also, just something you will be aware of this from the committees that I sat on previously with Matthew. If we can get those presentations in advance as well for us to sink us teeth into, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you, though. Thank you. It was really good.
Did you work it out? I can work left to right.
I think, shall we?
We kind of did, but it did make Batley look a bit like a stately home.
Yes, yeah, just a little bit.
That's the plan.
Councillor Taylor, your question, please.
Yeah.
Or comments.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again, Simon. When we last looked at the Smaller Towns programme in the previous iteration of the scrutiny panel, we were looking at the stage of public consultation and the place standard initiatives that have been run across the four towns, and the numbers were very, very small. I mean, almost to the level that they weren't really consultation. And I'm doing this from memory, but it was 100 and odd people had responded in Home Firth or some in Heckmondwike, something like that, and you can hardly claim that was a strong demonstration of the views of the people of Heckmondwike. You've gone through some further consultations in each of these. Would it be possible to give us some indication of the volumes of people that we've been engaging with and how we've done that engagement? Because I think one of the things I learned with Place Standard is you get the best responses by talking to the people who don't want to talk to you. And if you're too passive, all you will get is interested parties, and you won't really get a proper sense for how the community is thinking. So if you could share a bit
Simon
on that,
or
please.
Isabel?
Yeah, I think Isabel's going to give you a little bit of a background, but if we probably need to go away and give you a bit more information, but I think Isabel can fill you in on a few of the details. Right, I do agree with you. It's really hard to engage, and in some of these communities, some communities are just a little fed up of being asked a lot of the time. But I think the lesson that we learned from the early place standard engagement processes was we need to keep the process open, keep it going. So we've done follow-up stages, we've done more consultation through the master plan, and inevitably we will go through a process of engagement and consultation as we develop the schemes as well. So it's a constant process. It's not just about that exercise in isolation. So do you want to touch on some of that, Isabel?
Yeah, so in terms of obviously Cleckheaton, we got 45 responses to the consultation. Obviously, we did 2 previous place standards engagements prior to the blueprint consultations, which received similar levels. You'll tend to find, depending on the community, it's depending on how much they do engage. So in Home Firth, for example, we got 464 responses. Hetman Dwight, we've just finished. We're still getting the responses in, but it's looking between 180 to 200 people at the minute, and Batley were 254. So it does vary depending on the community, and we did follow, you know, a similar process. I think in terms of Cleckheaton, there were lessons learned. We've done supplementary social media targeted responses, because we know that demographics tend to lean towards the older generation, so 45 plus. So we have tried to reach out via social media and made the process as easy as possible. So quick fire questions to try and gauge what people's initial thinkings are. You'll tend to find that consultation people are engaging very early on, so they'll click in, but following it through and engaging fully in the process, that's where you'll tend to find people drop off. So making it as easy as possible. We do obviously, we've got materials, promotional materials that go out via press, physical materials in town centres and things, make community groups aware. That's the early stages before we start consultation. We then run officer sessions, drop into businesses and allow them to have conversations one-on-one with ourselves, and obviously have online presence as well. And we are, you know, we're open to tweaking that process and keeping it open as we go through.
Councillor Taylor, any supplementaries on that?
Thank you. I think it makes my point for me that if you want to find out what the community want, you have to go and get in front of their faces. It doesn't matter how much material you put out there. It doesn't matter how easy you try and make the online process. It doesn't matter what social media you use. If you want to know what the people of Cleckheaton think, you need to actually physically go out there and ask them. And that's what Place Standard does when it does it well. It doesn't just go to community groups, it doesn't just go to businesses. You know, when I've run them, I've stood outside the co-op on a Friday night and talked to people as they're going in to get a bottle of wine. They're people who would never think of clicking on a Facebook social media post. But their views are probably more important to us, because the people who regularly and easily engage are the people who are perhaps least representative of the broader community. So if you're only getting 45 responses in Cleckheaton, suggests we haven't done any public consultation. What we've got is responses from interested parties. And I stressed this last time, and I will keep stressing this in every opportunity I get, that if we want to understand our communities, we have to go and talk to them. We can't be passive and expect them to respond to any online type thing, or leaflets you put out, or posters you put up, or organising a meeting in a library or community hall, because the only people who turn up are those who are engaged actively. And what you want is a broader range of views, because what there's a danger is you only get the views of certain interested groups, and that isn't representative of the entire community. And then what you find is people then will be saying, well, I wasn't consulted, nobody asked me, I didn't know anything about it, even though they've had 3 million different ways of possibly engaging. So I would suggest that if you do reflect, you perhaps need to reflect on how do we do that, getting in the face of people who don't actually want to give us their views.
Councillor Turner, I can see you
We've just done as we pointed out, done the Hetman White one, and I know we did face-to-face meetings in the farmers' market, didn't we, for one? So that is ongoing. The problem with any consultation, as you rightly point out, is it's usually those with an interest, a vested interest. And it's always been, how do you reach what we traditionally call the hard to reach people? And then you get the other extreme where we've done Home Firth, we've had that many consultations in Home Firth that some of the people I speak to who represent the community in Home Firth tell me, just get on with it, we're sick of being asked, let's get on with it. It's, you know, and it's same with the cultural heart. People say, just get on with it. You've asked us, people responded, so just get on with it now. So there's a balance between consulting at the right level and over consulting sometimes, because that just delays things. So, and as I say, I know we've had people out in Etman Wyke, and yet the response is still relatively low. But I know we've had boots on the ground there. But hey, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Any supplementary, Councillor Taylor? Just, do you want to come in? The presentation being distributed us to beforehand, appreciate that. It's interesting to note that certain areas have got more engagement, and I can understand maybe that's based on the demographic that you're dealing with. But yes, I do take the panel members' comments in terms of potentially interested parties having overbearing on the consultation and the wider public maybe missing out, and it's how we do that moving forward and to what extent. But I can see that you're trying to make ways and do ways to try and engage the wider public, so I do appreciate that. And also thank you, Simon and Isabel, for all your hard work in terms of the projects moving forward. I know it's going to be something that's going to be really groundbreaking and changing for all the communities across the board. So really, really do appreciate that. If there's any final comments or questions that the officers or Councillor Turner wants to make at this point, you can do so on this agenda item. No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you both. That was the final item. I thank you all the panel members for attending, the Cabinet member and officers. Really appreciate it. And just a reminder that the next meeting will be held on 14th of August. So hopefully see you then. Thank you.